What is going on, guys? Welcome back to the channel, and today we're going to be doing an in-depth guide for Reeve in Star Wars Hunters. Reeve has essentially been my main ever since the game launched, or I guess you would say soft launched. As of late, I've probably been playing J3 a little bit more just because I obviously bought him more recently, but I would say that overall Reeve is probably the character I've played the most since the game came out. So I thought she was the perfect hunter to start with, and I do think she'll be really popular as well, so I thought I would definitely try and get her guide out before I do everyone else's. If you guys do end up enjoying the video, then be sure to hit that like button, and if you are new to the channel, then feel free to subscribe and turn on those notifications. There is going to be plenty of Star Wars Hunters content in 2022, so definitely make sure you subscribe to the channel. Now anyway, like I said, this is going to be an in-depth guide. We're going to be going through essentially everything that you could possibly need to know about Reeve. We're going to be going through the base stats in terms of the HP, the damage, the swing speed, the sprint speed, all those kinds of things. We're going to go through the damage stats and the cooldown and all that kind of thing for all of her abilities, as well as the ultimate ability. Then I'm going to go through what loadouts I think are the best to use depending on the game mode, and then at the end of the video I'm going to just give some sort of basic tips as well as some enemies to watch out for too. So there's plenty to go through, and without wasting any more time, we're going to get stuck straight into it. So starting off with Reeve's base stats, and her HP is 150, which I believe is the lowest in the game. Reeve is a very aggressive and sort of high damage type of character, but she obviously doesn't have too much health as well, so you do have to play her in a pretty specific way, and we'll get into that a little bit more once we get through the basic tips. As for her damage, she deals 40 per hit with the lightsaber, and she has a swing speed of 2 swings per second, so she can deal essentially 80 damage per second, and that is definitely up there towards the top in terms of all the other hunters. Her passive ability is that she actually blocks incoming blaster fire. This doesn't last permanently, so it will eventually run out, and you guys can see, I guess, a bit of a stamina bar on your screen when you're playing as Reeve. As soon as you start blocking those incoming blaster bolts, there will be a little red bar that sort of shows up on your screen. You can kind of gauge how much stamina you have left before you will start taking damage. Now, in terms of her sprint speed, she runs 100 meters over the course of 16 seconds, which is definitely up there towards one of the fastest characters in the game. And as for her jump, she just has a regular jump, which to be honest I thought would be one of the higher jumps because obviously she is force sensitive. I thought they would give her a higher jump similar to Zany, for example, but I think they've sort of changed that just for balancing reasons, and she does actually have a way that she can get up onto higher ledges anyway. So she does just have the regular jump, but she is still very mobile nonetheless. Now, getting into her abilities, she has 3 different abilities, obviously, one being the lightsaber throw, the other one being Vicious Leap, and her last one being the Ruthless Pursuit ability. Her saber throw is pretty self-explanatory. She just throws her lightsaber like it says in the title. It deals 45 damage per hit, and it can deal a second round of damage on the way back, and it does have a total distance of 15 meters, so that obviously adds a lot to her range. Obviously, she is a melee hunter, so she is a bit more of a close range type of hunter, but the saber throw does definitely give her a little bit of range. The saber throw has a 9-second cooldown, which is pretty quick, and so this is definitely one of her most useful abilities in the game. Next up, we have the Vicious Leap, and this one essentially causes Reeve to do a huge force jump to where she's aiming, and then she essentially just deals damage to the ground that she hits, and that totals 25 damage per hit. So that is a pretty weak amount of damage for an ability, but this ability is kind of more about mobility than it is about the actual damage. So 25 damage on top of actually being able to move around a lot faster, that is still a pretty decent ability. Now, she can jump a whopping 22 meters with the Vicious Leap, and if you actually aim it on top of a ledge, you can actually jump up onto the areas that only, say, Vex or Zany can get to. So like I said, this ability is definitely more about the actual mobility than it is about the damage, and it has a 12-second cooldown, which is pretty good for how decent this ability is. Moving on, we have the Ruthless Pursuit ability, and this one essentially just makes Reeve sort of slash forward with her lightsaber, gaining a bit of ground and dealing 60 damage per hit. This one has a distance of 10 meters, which is definitely a lot less than the previous 2 abilities, but with that being said, it is still a great way to sort of catch up to an enemy who's maybe running away, and with the cooldown of only 6 seconds, that definitely makes up for the shorter distance than the other abilities. Now, moving on, we have Reeve's ultimate ability, and this is called Crushing Will. This ability essentially force pulls everyone within the area. It has a distance of 10 meters, so anyone within 10 meters will actually be sucked in towards Reeve, and then it deals 75 damage on that pull, as well as actually stunning those enemies because they kind of get knocked to the ground. And then on top of that, because they're all sort of pulled into the same location, you can then obviously use your lightsaber to sort of just deal damage to all of those enemies at once. And in my opinion, this is probably one of the better ultimate abilities in the entire game. The cooldown for her ultimate ability is 2 minutes and 45 seconds, and I believe that is just the same for every single hunter. But obviously, if you go around the map and pick up those ultimate power-ups, then that will become a lot faster. Now, one other quick little tip is that this ability can actually drag the Hutt Ball towards Reeve as well. Obviously, as of right now, Hutt Ball isn't in the game, but that is still a very useful tip to know once the Hutt Ball actually does arrive. You can actually pull in a bunch of enemies towards you, take them out, and then the hut ball will actually be picked up automatically as well. So like I said, this is definitely one of the better ultimate abilities in the game, and you should definitely try and make the most of it as much as possible. Now, moving on to the loadouts, I've toyed around with a bunch of different combinations, and I think I've landed on the ones that work best for me. These are obviously somewhat subjective. They obviously just depend on how you play the game, and something that suits me might not suit you, but I'm just going to go through the ones that I personally think are the best, at least for my playstyle anyway. For the Ruthless Pursuit ability, I use the Spree loadout, and this just increases the cooldown by 6 seconds, which totals a 12-second cooldown. But what it does is it actually allows you to pretty much reset the cooldown for that if you get a kill when you actually use the Ruthless Pursuit ability. So if you have an enemy in your sights who's on say 50 HP and you use this on that enemy and actually take them out, then rather than it having a 12-second cooldown, it will actually cool down straight away. And so I've found that this is actually really good as a finisher. You can kind of deal a bunch of damage, and then when an enemy tries to run away, you can actually use this to sort of finish them off, and it just cools down straight away, and you can kind of get straight back into the action and do the same thing to the next enemy. As for Vicious Leap, I actually just use the core loadout for this one. I have tried the other two, and in my opinion they are essentially just completely useless. The core loadout allows you to much better utilize the leap, as it actually can get you up onto those ledges like I mentioned before, and if you use the Harrier one instead, it will deal a little bit more damage, but it is only 40 damage total, and it removes the ability to actually use this wherever you want. You can only use it when you're locked onto a target. So for me personally, the core loadout is definitely the best one for Vicious Leap. Now, as for the Saber Throw loadout, the one that I use is actually the Transfix loadout, and this one applies a small stun to the enemies at the cost of a longer cooldown. It increases the cooldown by 6 seconds, which takes that to 15 seconds overall, but that stun on the Saber Throw is actually absolutely clutch. If you're getting chased down, for example, by Roz or J3 or someone and you're on low health, you can actually throw the Saber at them, immediately run the other way, and sort of get some ground on them while they're obviously stunned, and on top of that, it also deals damage as well. So for me, that's the one that I use. The core one is also just as good. It obviously just negates that stun, but it also just has a faster cooldown. That one is really useful as well. There is another loadout there which is actually called Call, as weird as that is to say, and this one just actually deals more damage, but it actually only deals damage to the first enemy that it hits, which means it can't deal damage on the way back, and it can't deal damage to groups of enemies. So that one for me is completely useless. I prefer Transfix, but Core is also really useful as well. So that is it for all of the loadouts that I use. I use those same loadouts regardless of which mode I'm playing, because for me personally, Reeve just plays pretty similar in either mode. She really is just kind of a Slayer type of hunter, and so for me personally, I just use the same loadouts no matter which mode I'm playing. Now, just quickly before we finish the video, we're going to get into some basic tips as well as some enemies to watch. And the first tip that I've got is that Reeve is really useful if you can play her aggressively, but you do need to play almost a bit of a hit and run type of playstyle. She's the type of hunter that you want to kind of try and flank your enemies and sort of get them by surprise, and a great way to actually engage in combat is actually to make the most of the Saber Throw to sort of deal that first damage. That'll put you at an advantage straight away, and then obviously she does really good damage with her lightsaber attacks. So just try and play that sort of hit and run type of playstyle. Don't try and tank damage with Reeve because she only has 150 HP, so always be on the look for a flank and just any opportunity to try and take out enemies from behind rather than attacking them head first. Lastly, like I mentioned before, also make sure to use the Vicious Leap to actually get to difficult places rather than using it for an attack. It only deals 25 damage, which really isn't that much at all. So you're better off to actually use that for, you know, getting up onto a ledge or just getting away from the action if you're in trouble. If you see an enemy who's really low on health, for example, then obviously it can still be useful to use for an attack. But at least for me personally, I try and save this more for when I'm in trouble or when I need to get to one of those higher up places. Now, lastly, just for some enemies to watch out for, and these are enemies who I just think are definitely better than Reeve, or at least in a 1v1 they're better than Reeve. And the two that I've got here are J3DI and Amara Vex. Now, I should say I think Reeve is actually better in a 1v1 versus Amara Vex, but at least from range, Vex obviously has the upper hand there. If you can get close to Amara Vex, then yeah, you're going to win that battle pretty much every single time, but from range she can deal a heap of damage, and by the time you can kind of close down that ground, a lot of the time you are already dead. So up close you don't really need to worry too much about Amara Vex, but at range you should definitely keep an eye on her. As for J3, he is just very difficult to take on in a melee battle. He has more health and he deals essentially the same amount of damage, and he also has the ability to block your lightsaber attacks, which can actually charge up his lightsaber attack and deal a heap more damage to you. So be very careful when you're fighting J3. You definitely want to try and get him from behind and sort of deal some early damage, and at that point you can definitely win. But if you're taking him head on and you're both at full health, then honestly he will pretty much win that 9 times out of 10 unless he's an absolute bot. So definitely keep an eye out for J3 as well. That is is going to do it for the very first hunter guide on the channel though, guys. Let me know what you guys thought of the video down below, whether there's any stuff that I've missed or any other stuff that you guys want me to cover in future guides. I am obviously going to be doing these type of guides for every single hunter in the game, not only the ones that we have now, but obviously as we get new hunters, I'll obviously do some hunter guides for those ones as well. But like I said, be sure to leave some feedback. Let me know what you think I should improve on or what I should add, or you know, anything that wasn't necessary to add in the video, and I'll definitely try and improve these as we go forward. If you enjoyed the video, then be sure to leave a like down below, and if you guys are new to the channel, then definitely hit that subscribe button and turn on those notifications, as there's going to be plenty more hunters content in 2022. Thank you all very much for watching. You guys have a great day, and I'll see you all out there in the arena.